Oh yeah, you can.
Get a cheaper. Do you know of any?
Oh, any of your tackle dealers can do that. Usually they're buying prepackaged stuff because a lot of people don't want to spend. A lot of people don't want to buy 50 pink skirts. I mean, they want to buy three or four, have a little bit of every color. But yeah, you can get a bulk. Even the Boaters World catalog, you can buy bulk. They sell them in packs of like 3, 5, 10. You can even buy a bulk packages of 15 of 10 different colors. And their price at that price, yeah, they're real inexpensive. These skirts aren't cheap. I recommend reusing them as much as you can. Once you start adding up skirts and all the tackle, it gets up there. And especially when you're out there fishing, as far as the hooks go, this type of hook, this regular generic Eagle Claw, the 4X strong hook, I recommend, as long as you can retie a rig on the ocean, and you're fishing and you get a king and you get most of that rig back, cut all the hooks off, put them on a new rig, but you're going to find about 99 times out of 100, you try to take this rig home when you're done at the end of the day, and I don't care if you let it sit in 500 gallons of fresh water for a month, that hook's going to rust. And I suggest once you get any kind of rust on a hook, don't reuse it at all.
Is there anything you want me to pass around?
Oh yeah, well I'm gonna go over some rigs, and they'll be on the rig. Okay.
You ever run multiple baits on one rig?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that. I got some double. I got one double kingfish rig up here now.
Can you use stranded cable instead of wire for your leader?
You can use it. My preference is that's a little bit more drag in the water. It's a lot harder to bend and turn, and usually when you're making a rig in that manner, you do a little bit different tying on the knot. Yeah, but I have no problem with that at all. I mean, a lot of factory rigs come like that, and they're good. I'm going to talk about some factory rigs, and yet you can use that wire. A lot of times you don't have to scale down. A lot of times you go out there, first rig, I mean, it could be even an old rig you had, got 80-pound wire on it. Boom, catch the biggest fish you like. It's just all a matter of, what fish are sometimes finicky. That's why they call it fishing. And you just got to, hopefully, when they're ready to bite, you've got your line in the water and they pretty much like what you got. Any other questions?
With the rigs and everything, let's say if you just pass Jenny, is there any particular tied in or tied out, tied steel, or does it matter?
Well, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the seminar. I got a whole thing on conditions and the type of places I like to fish.
What's your distance between your Carolina keeper and your live bait?
It all depends. I like to put it anywhere from 3 to 5 inches. And a lot of people think there's so many different things why they have a skirt on there. Different color water types makes a difference for what kind of skirt I use. If I'm way offshore and I got skirts that kind of look like sargasso weed or something, a lot of times I'll try to make it look like that bait maybe just swimming right around that sargasso weed and make it look like, that thing might be chasing a little bait fish that's in that thing. And that's ideally what I think, that when they see these skirts, they see your live bait chasing this and they think, that might be another fish or a piece of weed that might have some bait on it, and they're just following this in the water. It's an added attractant, and like I said, half the time you're going to catch them with this and half the time you're not, and it's just a matter of figuring out if you're getting a lot of bites on something. I suggest throw everything you got at them that's that. I've rigged 6 rods with a squid like this. Throw it every time. If they're biting that, some days they won't bite that. I like to try to change. If I'm having success on one thing and you're fishing and you got a lot of rods out and you're not catching anything on those rods, I suggest cutting everything you got off and changing it to whatever that is until they stop biting.
On most fish, you hook those fish on the stinger or the live bait hook?
You could, it all depends. You can have a rig with two stingers, or you can use one live bait hook like this. I got one that has 1 stinger and 2 live bait hooks, and basically this rig here is the rig I use in Biloxi, even a lot longer than this because the size baits we were using were 1 to 3 pound baits.
And fish that hit it, do you find that you normally catch them on the live bait hook or on one back?
It's pretty much random. I've caught them with just this one hook in them, just right there in the lip or on the top of the back. It's pretty much random. if you're gonna hook them, they're gonna stay hooked. It's just a matter of how hard you pull on them. Any other questions on that? All right, I'm going to go over some basic rigs that I normally use. The one thing I recommend on the rigs, first and foremost, is learn how to tie your own rigs. It'll save you so much money, and it'll actually save you a lot of time too. Buy a factory rig, copy it exactly, and I tell you, once you master how to tie a rig, I can tie a rig in about a minute. I can tie one of this rig here will take me about 2.5 minutes to tie, and that's about 5 different knots. Once you get going on tying them and get some practice tying them, you're not going to have any problem. They're real easy, and your cost will go down about 60-70%. But there's nothing wrong with buying a factory rig like I'm going to talk about. It's just a matter of learning how to do the haywire twist on the wire. It's a little bit different than using big piano wire, which is wire I consider over 100-pound test. Kind of wire that you can almost, after you do the twist, you can break it off with your hand. This type of wire is kind of a little bit harder to do that. And when you're learning to tie, expect to get 300,000 holes in every one of your fingers. And the first time you attempt to try to tie a couple rigs, it's going to take 2 or 3 days to recover. And then once you finally get used to getting it poked in your finger, your fingers get a little tougher, and it'll be real easy to tie them, because they're going to poke. You're going to get holes in your finger. You're going to cut. And if you're doing it in the garage like I do, if you don't have shoes on, you drop a piece on the ground, and you go on your foot, and you're going to feel like very painful. The most common rig that I use, and I use this rig probably more than any other rig, is just a plain single, I call a single bait rig. It consists of a live bait hook and just a stinger hook tied on there. I'm going to pass all these around after I get done explaining them. And this rig right here can either be a nose hook, treble hook, 2 treble hooks. It can be a nose hook, 3 treble hooks, 2 treble hooks. It can be a 4 treble hooks. It can be just a matter of sizing it to what bait you're fishing with. This leader happens to be relatively short. This is probably close to a 30-inch leader total. This is pretty much a standard rig I use here off of Charleston. It all depends. Sometimes I might even go a little bit shorter or longer, just depending on where I might be fishing. If I might be fishing in an area that's holding a lot of AJs and Cudas, I'll probably go a little bit longer rig, because then you never know. Big Cuda, you fight a Cuda for 30 minutes, he breaks you off, you don't get a chance to see him. You might think that's the winning fish you lost in the fishing tournament, or the biggest kingfish you ever lost. A little bit longer, depending on how they're biting, is a little bit better. Here, I'm going to start passing these around.
Robert, you try to put that trailer up out where the tail of the fish comes. Is that how you sort of feed it?
I match it up, yeah, to the bait. I don't necessarily have it at the tail or even behind the tail. My preference is on any bait that's a soft bait. It really doesn't make a difference if you hook it into the bait, like a menhaden, because when a fish hits a menhaden, I would think when he's on a rig, 90% of the time, he's not even going to get any of that thing, because those menhaden just disintegrate in the water. I mean, he's just going to hopefully get the teeth. Get the hooks, and that's it. Next, I'm going to try this is a standard double rig that I tie. Now, I can tell you, you're going to talk to a lot of people that they do a lot of king fishing. Everybody ties their rigs different. I necessarily don't use this rig every time, but if I have standard menhaden, 6-8 inches, this is a standard rig I'll use for 2 of them. This is basically a nose hook and a treble, about 8 inches of wire, and another nose hook and treble. You'll find once you learn how to tie these things, you'll find out which side of the hook that you'll have less drag when you're tying these little haywire twists on there. So these things will be able to move freely and bend. A lot of times if you tie it around the opposite way that the other one is, you'll find that this thing will sit out like this the whole time, and it really won't flow freely straight up and down. And you basically want to check, if you notice, all these will flow pretty much straight up and down. And it's just a matter of practice and getting that knot down. You'll find people that say this knot's not worth a hoot. I haven't had any problem with this knot. I've caught a lot of fish on this knot, this haywire twist. And like I said, some people have their preference on how they tie it. Sure way to tell if your knot's any good is you can practice, do one, hook it to something, pull it with a big boga grip or something, tell you how much poundage you got, and that's a pretty good way to tell. Normally when you're fighting kingfish, there's never going to be a time that you're ever going to have 40 pounds of weight on this fish. You're usually 90% of the time you're going to have 1 to 2 pounds of drag. Now in Mississippi, I had 6 pounds of drag on the reel, and that's a lot of drag on a reel for a kingfish. And believe me, when you got 150 boats fishing in an area not much bigger than this whole place, if that fish gets any farther than 50, 60 yards from your boat, you're not catching them. And that just happened to be that particular day. One of the fish we weighed in at 47.8, from the time it hit, we put it in the boat, it was less than 4 minutes. We timed it. And we had that fish, and I had that fish on drag that I wouldn't normally use when I'm fast trolling ballyhoo offshore so tight, because we had like about 8 boats around us at the time, and all we did was try to keep it in a little circle and try to keep that fish straight up and down. I didn't even give him a chance to run, because I knew if he did, we were going to lose him, and there was no sense in that, so I just did what I could. We got lucky and got him in. He was so green when we came in the boat, and he actually almost jumped out of the boat, because my boat sits so low in the water. And Kelly, one of the guys on my boat, Kelly, we actually had to physically jump on the fish. And I'd say that's not pleasant, because a 47-pound green kingfish is just like putting a cobia in a cooler. I don't know if you ever caught a cobia, put him in a regular cooler. Your cooler is no longer going to be the same after he gets done with it. I can assure you. But yeah, I'm going to pass. This one here is the standard, and you'll see I have that Carolina keeper on there with that skirt. That's probably close to the distance. I moved a little bit around. Difference between a naked rig and a skirted rig is pretty self-explanatory. A naked rig has nothing on it. No attractant, no squid, no bead, no spinner. I mean, you'll see people, if you ever fish in fishing tournaments and you ever get a chance to look at some of their tackle when they're coming in for a weigh-in or anything, they'll have all kind of stuff on there. I've seen it all. I've tried it all. And like I said, sometimes it works. It's a matter of personal preference. But this is just the standard naked rig. This is a rig that's real similar to the one we used when we were in Mississippi. Actually, the rig was, we used about 4 foot a leader before the first hook. And we still had fish come up and eat everything, including 3-4 foot of fluorocarbon.
What's the minimum that you would go to from the live bait hook to the stinger? Absolute minimum, putting them together.
The minimum is as close as you can tie those 2 wires. You know, that you need a little bit of distance when you're doing them. I would say 4 inches. Really, you probably don't want to try to fish. You don't really want to fish with a bait that's like that big. I mean, I have fished with bait this big. Trust me, I've used a double rig with 4 hooks and used 4 mullet on there this big, caught kingfish because there was no other bait available at the time. I've used whatever I want. I've even used 5 hook ribbon fish rigs with 5 cigar minnows trolled in the prop wash and caught kingfish. And sometimes they'll hit anything, and sometimes, like I said,